If you've heard of imposter syndrome, you may have also heard that it affects more women than it does men. And this is a complete myth. And what I'm going to do in this video is explain why and why it's so damaging for both women and men. Hi, I'm Tara Halliday. I'm the Imposter Syndrome specialist and author of Unmasking. Imposter syndrome, if you haven't heard of it, is the secret feeling of being a fraud, that maybe you're not good enough, and the fear of being found out. And it affects 70% of high achievers at some point in their careers. Now, this is both men and women equally. That's really the point I wanted to make here. Here's the real problem. Imposter syndrome is a belief that you're not quite good enough, that you don't belong. You feel like you're different from everyone else around you, that everyone else is doing fine and doing well, and you're the only one having these feelings of doubt and maybe anxiety with it, stress, overworking, over-preparing, and all the things that come with imposter syndrome. Now, if it's primarily a women's issue, then women can look at how they're feeling and they think it must be something to do with me because I'm a woman. So it's inherently got built in that there's something detrimental and bad about being a woman in a business environment. How it affects men is if men see that it's a primarily women's issue, then men will feel even more isolated, even more like it's just them. So both men and women, if it's seen as a woman's issue, will feel even more like there's something wrong with me. There's something not quite right, I'm not quite good enough. Leadership shouldn't have to be so hard. It is the answer, it must be me. And that is the imposter syndrome belief. That's the belief that underlies all of imposter syndrome. So first, why do we have this impression of it being a women's issue? Because the earliest research done back in 1978 looked at female graduate students, and research studies that followed that focused on it being maybe a women's issue. And when they did their research, surveying both men and women seemed to come out around about 70% feeling like a fraud, feeling like they're not quite good enough, and only 40% for the men. In the early 1990s, a study was done that made the surveys completely anonymous. So there was no way that anyone could see who was responding in what way. And when it was completely anonymous, guess what? The numbers came out exactly equal. Men and women experienced imposter syndrome at about the same level, about 70% at some point in their career. So in all of these studies that showed it was more women than men, they weren't capturing how many people experience imposter syndrome. They were actually capturing how many people were willing to talk about it in an environment that was not completely confidential. There's also a biological reason why many women would think it's a women's issue, why it would seem to resonate more. One of the survival traits that our brains developed way back with our cavemen ancestors was to look out for danger. And danger was very immediate. We look right in front of us. There's a rustle in the forest and we look out, we look to it to see what we can spot. This means when we're feeling uncomfortable, like we have some self-doubts, we're feeling not quite good enough, we look to try and explain why. And because we feel that we don't quite belong, we're different from others around us, one of the more obvious things is, well, most of them are men, I'm a woman, maybe it's to do with being a woman. That satisfies the brain, but it doesn't get to the real issue because it's a belief. Now, ladies, here's the secret of how men experience imposter syndrome in a mostly male environment. They might think it's something else. Maybe it's my education, I didn't go to the right school. Maybe it's my accent. Maybe it's my wealth level. I didn't grow up in a rich enough environment. Maybe I don't deserve to be here. So it's still got all those elements of I don't belong. But of course, they can't blame it on being a woman. What I'd love for you to take away from this is that imposter syndrome is not what it seems. Imposter syndrome is down to a belief that I'm not quite good enough. It's not a women's issue. It's not a men's issue. It's a human issue. And there is something you can do about it. What you can do is change the belief that underlies all of imposter syndrome. And when you do that, then you can feel like you finally belong, you're finally good enough, and you can get on with excelling and enjoying your success.